source code of D3JS. It's a library that can be used to display beautifully rendered vector diagrams, and these are some of the examples. If you are familiar with it, you already know that it's a very powerful library and a very popular one. If you are not, you can go through the D3 examples to get some inspiration. So I've personally used it on a few projects, but I've never considered myself an expert on D3. Probably I don't have what it takes to be a good visual programmer, but I've always interacted in the source code. So let's go straight into the source code. The source code is actually arranged in small buckets where small libraries handle different components of the D3 whole. For example, this is a library for handling transitions. This is a library for handling colors. What I'm going to look at today is the D3 array. This is a library that has extended JavaScript core array functions like push, pop, with some D3 specific functions like minimum, maximum, statistical functions you can think of. So let's see how this code is implemented. So when you go to the file called mean.js, this is where D3 uses a function to get a minimum out of an array. And this function can take an array of values, and you can provide a function to extract, map each value into a value that you want to get a minimum of. You will see a pattern here that first they are checking if you provide the second argument. If you don't provide it, then it is basically going through the full list and finding out the minimum value, and in the end returning the minimum value. If you are providing an extractor function, then it is going to call your extractor function for each of the item in your array and give you the index as well as the full array in case you want to do something with it, and take the output of your extractor function and use that for comparison. Now let's take a look at this test code of this method. It's very easy to find the tests because they named it following a convention. And as you can imagine, when your array has one item, the minimum is 1. When your array has more than one item, it still finds the minimum. It does work on non-numerical types as well. It does some standardization, like if it's not a number, the return is undefined on many cases. So it does some sort of a normalization there. So now let's look at the opposite of the min function. It's called the max function. And what you will notice is it looks awfully similar to the min function, which is a pattern that I saw throughout this code. It seems like there is an iteration happening on the given arrays where you're looking at directly the item or passing the item to extract a value out of the item. And the min and max function, the only place they differ is actually in this operator. To put them side by side, so just remember this operator. So we see max less than value. So if we go to min, we just see min greater than value. That's the only difference. So I imagine this could have been, code could have been reused between min and max. But now let's go to another method where I see the similar pattern. It's called sum. Again, you already see the similar pattern of either it's looking at the values directly or it's calling an extractor function to get the value. So in this case, the iterator is again very similar, except instead of comparing, this one is just adding the values on an accumulator. What I found interesting is there was a function called mean.js. So I was just expecting mean would call the sum function and divide it by the count. But instead of doing that, they have re-implemented the sum function and they have counted the elements here. Obviously, they check for null values. I think that's why they did a little bit of optimization. But I found it somewhat redundant between the iterator pattern that is present in mean, max, sum, as well as not being able to use the sum function to implement the mean function, which would be a more natural way of thinking about it. Similarly, if you look at, there's a method called meanIndex, and you see that the meanIndex method is a almost identical copy of the min method, except instead of returning the min, it returns the meanIndex. I imagine these two methods, the mean and mean index, could have been written using a single method and just using the return value of whichever made sense. Again, this could have been also reused on the max method because we just changed that operator. And similarly, the sum and min method could have been reusing some code between the two. Overall, I see this iterator pattern over and over again throughout this repository, which I think would be nice to extract out so that you could only focus on the core logic and not have to repeat the iterator on every file that you go into. I would say this code is easy to follow. I would say that the test code helps understanding what's happening inside. I would also argue that these methods should probably have been methods within JavaScript itself. Seem like fairly useful methods to have on an array of numbers. The developers on this code could have probably reduced the code size by reusing some patterns, extracting those into some methods so that they could focus on the actual computation instead of the iterator method that shows up everywhere. Overall, I like the design idea of D3 to that they broke it down into smaller libraries. So you may still find these array functions useful even if you don't use the powerful rendering features within D3. I would say I'm not very impressed with the code quality here because of the duplication. But overall, I imagine anyone new getting started into the D3 code will find that this code is not difficult to follow at all. Thank you for your time. Hope to see you in another episode.